Welcome to the Sleep Sense Show. As always, brought to you by the Sleep Sense program, where podcast listeners can get a free customized sleep plan by going to www.sleepsense.net/listen.
Hi, I'm Dana, and welcome to the show. Have you ever felt like you're a mom out of control? I'm guessing the answer to that question is yes. If so, you're going to want to hang on and listen to my interview today with Heather Chavah. She is the creator of the Mom is in Control podcast. If you haven't had a chance to check that out yet, I would encourage you to do so. She reveals her most vulnerable truths about motherhood, parenting 3 boys. She's lived through stage 4 cancer and just has a really down-to-earth perspective on how we should be living our lives and also how we should be parenting our children. Her motto is, in order to raise happy, calm, and confident children, we must become the person we most desire them to be. And we have a really in-depth conversation today about what it means to be living our best lives. I think from Heather's perspective, dealing with basically a life-threatening disease really put a spotlight on how she had been living her life and really was the motivation behind making some positive changes and looking more at living life to the fullest for herself first. I think so many of us tend to put our children so high up on our list of priorities that we completely neglect and forget about ourselves. And we want to talk today about why that's harmful, not just to yourself, but also to the message you're sending your children. I've always believed that my role is to raise up great humans, right? And I think an important piece of raising up a great human is modeling the way in which a good human lives. So I really try to set an example for my children by showing them that everyone's needs and wants and feelings are important and that I have my own goals and wants and career aspirations and that it's important to me to fulfill my own desires, and that I hope that they do that too when they go out into the world as adults and become parents someday, potentially, that the lessons that they've learned are something that they will pass on to their own children. So if you're looking for a little more, we don't like the word balance, but if you're looking for some insight in how you might take some steps to start respecting your own needs and wants and just moving yourself up on the list of priorities so that you can be living this one beautiful, precious life that you have to live. So stay tuned and enjoy our conversation. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the show. Welcome, Heather. It's so great to have you here.
I'm excited for this conversation, Dana. Thank you.
Me too. So let's just dive right in. You've got a really excellent TEDx talk where you describe being diagnosed with stage 4 cancer and all the emotions that were coming up around that. And then one of the lines that really hit home for me watching that was a quote. I'll quote you. You said that you hadn't been living a life worth fighting for. What did life look like for you then, and why wasn't it a life worth fighting for?
Yes. So digging deeper and just pulling back the layers a little bit. So the TEDx is called Dying to Be a Good Mother. And it was interesting because up until that point, being a mother, so I have 3 boys, they're 15, 10, and 7. I was diagnosed with cancer in 2013. And previous to that, when I became a mother, which was 9 years before that, I remember looking at my son, and I was a teenage mom. I was 18. And I looked at my son, and for the first time in my entire life, I had this desire to become better. And what I meant by that is, today, in that moment, was I proud of who I was? And the answer was no. So I remember looking at my son thinking, I need to become the person that I most desire you to be. And he really pushed me. He was my why, and he pushed me to become more and more and more. And so I really fell in love with personal development and meditation and mindfulness, and went to school as a social worker, fell in love with mental health and really understanding why people do what they do. Because when he was little, I had this thought around feeling out of control, which is why my podcast is called Mom is in Control, feeling out of control regarding his behaviors and not understanding them. And again, I had to become. And then being diagnosed, I thought I came so far. And I was really doing it. From the outside, I was being praised as the super mom. I was getting the pat on the back. But I was getting the pat on the back for how tired I was. I was getting the pat on the back for how much was on my to-do list and how good of a multitasker I was. And I was ambitious and I had goals, but part of that was fueled from a place of fear that I wasn't enough as a mother. And none of it came from, what do I want? What do I want my life to look and feel like? And I was operating from this taskmaster in hopes that I could run so far away from the person that I never wanted my son to become. And so by the time I was diagnosed, my youngest, who's now, he's 7, he'll probably be 8. Well, he will be 8 soon. Not probably. He'll be 8 in a month. Every time they get a new birthday, I'm like, dang it, you screwed up my pitch. I always have your numbers right, and then you have birthdays. So he was he was around a year old when I was diagnosed, and I lived for them. I lived and breathed for my children. And again, that is socially acceptable to do that. Mm-hmm. And I was put against the wall, like backed into a corner. And I didn't feel like I had a life worth fighting for. What I meant by that was, who am I without my role as a mother? And, my oldest, when he went off to school, I was in this weird paradox or purgatory state where I was pregnant for the second one. I wasn't working because I was like in between, and I had no idea how to find a sense of purpose in my life beyond being his caregiver. Right. And that continuously was carried with me until I was diagnosed. And I thought, what am I fighting for? I really don't know. If I'm sitting here in the hospital bed and I'm, my children are fed and they're taken care of, and I can't work on my business, like, what else am I supposed to do? And it was such an eye-opener for me.
Yeah, that I see a lot of moms doing is just this culture of busy, right? Like, actually is a little bit of a pet peeve of mine when I ask people how they are and they say they're so busy, because I feel like that's a non-answer, right? Like, what does that even actually mean? But we're just driving ourselves crazy with all of this busy work. And you're right, you lose sight of what do you really want out of this precious life that you have to live?
Yeah. And it's interesting that you say that, because now people, they'll say to me, wow, you're doing so much out in the world, Heather. You must be so busy. And I'm like, my life is full and my plate is full, but I get to choose what is on my plate. I get to choose what I say yes to and what I say no thank you to. And that is the beauty of, quote unquote, feeling in control of your life. And I feel like previous to getting cancer, I was aware, and I don't know why, but I was aware that we have one precious life. I mean, we've all had people in our lives, maybe not, that we've lost, and we've witnessed people, and we've watched how they live their life. And I think at some point we look at ourselves in the mirror and we say, am I happy with who I am? Am I happy with how I treat myself? Am I happy with how I treat other people? If I went today would that be enough for me? And my answer was no. And I had to really dig deep. And it wasn't actually that complicated. I just had to start giving myself permission to want what I wanted.
Right. And so give us an example of maybe one of the first things you did to sort of get back to yourself after this diagnosis.
Yes. Okay. So this is always an interesting question. I'll hear people say, I don't know what I want, right? We hear that a lot. Like, I have no idea. But, and I'll kind of circle back to this main question. But when people say, I don't know what I want, here's the thing. You do. You just have to maybe take a few steps back to listen, right? One, you have to give yourself space to actually honor what that is. But we all know what we don't want. And this doesn't need to be complicated. But women especially, and I think humans in general, we're really going from 0 to 60 like that. So my first marathon that I ran post-cancer, I did not train for. I literally went from couch to marathon with very little training, which is pretty much in alignment with my personality around, ambition and just driven and all of that. I was not like this as a teenager, by the way. Terrible motivation, I was the most likely to not succeed. Like, that was the vibe that I put out into the world. And if people look at me now, they'd be like, I would have never predicted this. So you have to find what motivates people, but you also need to realize that this is incremental change. This is not overnight success. And when you decide enough is enough, nobody else is going to decide that for you. And I know, Dana, you and I talked about this on the podcast, on my podcast, about sleep. When you decide enough is enough, like, I am done with this sleep stuff. I am now going to solve this problem. Like, you've had enough. You're at your rock bottom. You will find how to change it. So you have to write a list of what you don't want. What's not working in your life? I'm done yelling. I'm done feeling like crap in my body. I'm done feeling disconnected in my parenting. I'm done hating my job. I'm done feeling like I never have enough time. I'm done feeling like I don't have enough energy. Like, you know what you don't want. So then you write that down, and on the flip side, what's the opposite? Well, if you're not yelling, what are you doing? Well, I feel really connected to my children. I feel amazing in my body. I feel, I'm really enjoying the challenge of work. Doesn't mean that you have to change your career. It's that your mindset is changing. How are you treating yourself mentally? The opposite of what you don't want. Right. And then you have to have the courage to step into that. The first thing that I did was I got out a pen and a paper, and I started asking myself, at the top I wrote, wouldn't it be nice if ... And I just free flowed my thoughts. Wouldn't it be nice if I could have a glass of water? Wouldn't it be nice if I could have a bubble bath with no interruptions? Wouldn't it be nice if I had the strength to walk around the block? Wouldn't it be nice if my husband was able to leave his job and, stay at home? Wouldn't it be nice if I made $1 million? Wouldn't it be nice if I loved my skin? Wouldn't it be nice if I never yelled again? And if I did, I knew exactly why. And I just started writing all of these things down. And I necessarily didn't have to act on them right away, but the little things like, wouldn't it be nice if I could have a glass of water? Well, guess what? Heather, all you have to do is drink a glass of water.
Right.
So I started to write down these little things, and then I would act on them. I would drink the glass of water. I would have the bubble bath. I would attempt to go for the walk, even if it wasn't around the block because I was weak post-treatment. I would go for 5 minutes. And eventually I noticed this spark and this energy started coming back to life inside of me. And I just kept rinsing and repeating that process. And now I'm here almost 7 years later, made the $1 million, husband works from home, feeling more alive and in alignment than ever, amazing relationships with my children. And yes, things go wrong and, they're uncomfortable on the daily, but I know how to maintain that. I know how to manage my emotions, and I know how to give myself permission to lean into the resistance and push through when I'm scared. And I just don't understand why it's culturally acceptable for women to put themselves last and not even consider themselves important, when we are, like, to me, parenting, especially womanhood, is a leadership role, and we really need to start showing up in our lives, because as we can see, this is making an impact in who's leading the next generation and how people are treating one another.
Oh, that all just resonates, hits home for me 100%. I've been talking to mothers for 16 years, and I can't even count how many times I hear people say things like, my kids are my whole life. And my response to that is, don't stop saying that, right? Like, you have your own beautiful life. You cannot make your children the center of your universe, because I feel like that's not fair to anyone, right? Like, it's not fair to you. And it's also, if you're the child feeling like you're your mother's everything, it's a lot of pressure to put on the child as well, right? Like, oh gosh, I can never step away from this person because I'm her everything. I think that's the story, right? That's part of that story piece, where you're just telling yourself this story that your kids are your entire universe and everything you do must revolve around them, and that your needs and wants and desires don't matter anymore. I mean, I agree. I don't know why that's become acceptable, but I agree that it's not. It shouldn't be.
Yeah, and I used to introduce myself as my children's mother. Like, that was my identity. And now when people are like, oh, tell me about yourself, I get very woo-woo, and I'm like, who am I? Like, what is my purpose here? Because we are not our titles. We are not our definition of who other people expect us to be. I am a mother, but that's just one aspect of who I am. And what are you going to do when your children leave your home? And I think, sometimes it's easy to go, they're my world. And I understand that, because we get a lot of validation from that, and praise. But what if you were somebody's world? Like, you were their only reason for existence. That is a large, like you said, it's a large burden to carry. But if you put yourself in your child's shoes, right? I've had people in my life, that's called codependency. Right. And I've had people in my life that have treated me like I am everything to them, or they need me, I need to be at their beck and call, or I need to act a certain way, which is what we do to our children. You need to behave a certain way. You need to look a certain way. You need to attend certain schools. You need to get certain grades. And when we put that pressure on our children, conscious or unconscious, they grow up feeling, one, that they're not in control of their own well-being, two, restrictive and panicked and in a little box. And we do it from a place of love, but it's not healthy love. And I've been in relationships with people like that, and it makes me want to run away from those people, because I one, I'm a rebel, and I don't like it when people are trying to control me. But two, I'm just like, you need a life. Like, I'm not your only thing. Please leave me alone. If I don't want to go out this weekend, it's not personal, right? If I act a certain way, it's not personal. If I dress a certain way, it's not personal. And I didn't realize that, because I just subscribed. I looked around. Like, I really had my best intentions in mind, and I looked around and I thought, okay, Heather, you are going to become the best mom you possibly can be. So I looked around in society and looked for women that I assumed were role models. And this is what they were doing. And I see it all the time, and it literally makes my insides cringe when I see, the mom memes going around. And we're recording this in the middle of the pandemic, and also the cultural conversation around, women struggling in the workforce and doing all of this. I'm like, well, where are the dads? Where are the men speaking up? And why can't they carry some of the burden as well? And also, why can't we just voice and say, this is unacceptable? And hello, this pandemic is also just shining a spotlight on what has not been sustainable for decades. And now you're just willing to do something about it, because we're all being backed into a corner, expected to homeschool and work full time at the same time. And putting that pressure on ourselves instead of saying, I'm not doing it.
Right.
Like, this isn't happening. And why are we not willing to take a stand for how we want to feel? But we're willing to take a stand for our children. So I think right now we're really being put in a pressure cooker to stare at ourselves in the mirror and really up our game. And I noticed, and as you can tell, I'm on a soapbox, but I noticed that when this pandemic happened, people were looking at me saying, what do you have to say? Or, how are you feeling about this? And I said, I've been through this once before. And they said, what do you mean? I said, when I was diagnosed, I was backed into a corner and realized how unsustainable my life was, and I did something about it. And that is what every other woman is being called to do right now, is to take a stand for how she truly wants to feel as a woman.
I love that. I'm on the box with you for sure. I love all of that. And I think one of the other things that's kind of always bothered me over the years is this discussion about balance, like finding balance, and mothers have to find balance. And, I would love to hear your perspective on this whole fantasy of balance. I mean, I think, I think in some ways it's quality, not quantity, right? Like I'm a working mom. I did travel a lot for my business. There's days where I'm gone before they're up and I'm not home till they're in bed. Like there are those days, but I'm not measuring out, minutes of how much time I'm spending with my family. When I do get to spend time with them, I try to make it meaningful and, quality time. But in my opinion, there's really just no reality in this idea of balance. I don't even actually know what that means when people say it to me. I don't know describe to me what that would look like. But what are your thoughts on this idea that women can have it all and balance everything?
Yes. Okay. This is such a great question. And I don't even want to say I've debated with some people over this, but because I'm not a debater, but I realize that everyone truly has their own definition of balance. For me, that word triggers me because it does feel like 50% here, 50% there, right? That feels like balance to me, like the traditional sense. For me, it's alignment. And what alignment means to me is I feel good and great and fabulous. But here's the deal. Some days, I always say you have to pay your taxes, right? Some days there's going to be things that you have to do that you don't want to do. We had a 4-day weekend this weekend. This week I gotta get through my inbox, right? But it doesn't mean that I need to just grind from sunrise to sunset. I have to ask myself, Heather, and I don't know why I talk to myself in third person all the time. How do you want to feel? And I want to feel alive and energized in my life. So I reverse engineer my time with that. And when it comes to my children, I do not put on my calendar, okay, I need to spend an hour with this child here, an hour with this child here, whatever, and then check off the boxes. If I'm checking off the boxes, I'm not there. I'm not connected. And every child is going to need something differently from you. But if I'm coming from this place of give to everybody else and I'm never giving to myself, my cup is empty, my cup is cracking at the bottom, and I am angry and resentful. So I've had to figure out how to fill myself first, and then everyone else benefits from that. What do I mean by that? Well, it could be really hairy in my house, right? The boys are going nuts, my husband's having a moment, and I'm okay because I've attended to my needs, and I could look at him and say, what do you need? And he'll just look at me and say, I need space. And I'm like, awesome, go get your space. And then I look at the boys and I'm like, what do you need? What's going on? Blah, blah, blah. And we can co-create this life together instead of, well, you went out last week and I did it. It's like, what do you need? Awesome. What do I need? Awesome. We honor each other instead of me managing everybody else. I'm teaching everybody how to manage their own life, but yet we can still be in relationship with each other. So their big emotions are not my responsibility, but I can live my life through example that I'm in control of my big emotions, and that if they are angry, it's like, what do you need to do to manage that? So it's a guidance, a teaching, but this alignment piece is so unique. This balance piece is so unique, and the definition is different for every woman and every man that I have come into contact with, and every single human that I've come into contact with. You ultimately have to ask yourself, what do I want my ideal life to look like? Mm-hmm. And then every day be committed to stepping into that vision.
Right. I agree. I think for some women, the idea of balance sort of forces them to, burn the candle at both ends, like try to squeeze every single component of what they think everyone else needs into a day. And you're right, that often leaves very little for their own personal, care and nurturing. So, it's a trigger word for me as well. And so let's shift now to the podcast, which is wonderful. It's called Mom is in Control. And I think we should start with the title, because when I first read the title, I was like, oh yeah, Mom is in control, like as in I'm control of everybody in this house sort of thing. But when I dive deeper into your podcast, I realized that that's not actually what you're saying. So I'd love for you to tell us, what does the title mean for you?
Yeah, so I actually don't like the title. It's grown on me. Back in the day, so this would have been, let's say, 7 years ago, I was doing target market research, and all the women that I was talking to were coming to me saying, I just want to feel in control. I just want to feel in control. And then it was time for me to start my podcast. And my coach at the time said to me, all right, well, the title should be Mom is in Control. And I'm like, ew, gross. I don't like that. I want it to be, something very woo-woo and, something that doesn't say what it is, right? So from a business perspective, it's great for SEO. But here's the thing. Women come to it and I'm like, how did you find me? And they'll say, I Googled mom and in control, or I Googled in control, or I Googled losing my mind and you popped up. And I was like, great. When we want control in our lives, when we are trying to control someone or something, when I'm trying to control, restrictively control my children's behavior or other people or what they look like, or, we just get very, the cleansiness. People will say, how do you do it all? How do you do your dishes and this and this? And I was like, those just aren't a priority for me anymore. But when I felt out of control in my life, man, my house was super clean. It was super clean, and laundry was done all the time, and there wasn't a dish in the sink, because that's how I was managing my big emotions. So for me, and I'm not saying, you can have a clean house. I just now have somebody that helps me do that. But, in the midterm, it was this moment where I'm like, Heather, are you going to choose your soul, or are you going to choose a perfectly clean home? And guess what? You get to ask for help. So you can enlist your partner and you can enlist your children, and we can just sit with the mess for a little bit to focus on what you truly want and desire. So control to me is internal control. When you want to feel that alignment, it is what actions are you taking on a daily basis to create the ultimate life that you crave, that thing that you are craving. It's the feeling that we're after. It's not the bigger house that you want. Why do you want a bigger house? Because you want a new start. You want to feel fresh. You want more space. Awesome. Get the bigger house. But I'm telling you right now, you're not going to have that feeling from getting that house. You might actually have more stress. Get the bigger house. You deserve the bigger house. But in the midterm, you want space. How can you cultivate space right now in your life, like today, right now while you're listening to this podcast? And an example for me, if I was sitting here going, man, I need space, what I would do is and if my children were home and it was chaotic, I would look at my partner, or if my partner wasn't home, I would go sit in my car and just sit in silence for 5 minutes. That is creating space. It's like, how can you have to ask yourself, how can I cultivate the feeling that I want right now? When I started this process and I was at my wit's end, I started running. I am not a runner. I look like Forrest Gump or something. It was ridiculous. Did not run as fast as him, but I ran and ran and ran. I had to let go of the cortisol that was in my body. It was ridiculous. I started sitting at the park by myself and be like, okay, I need 30 minutes. And I would cry, and I would just cry and cry and cry. And I thought, this is supposed to make me happy. Happy people go to the park or they go for a walk by themselves. Why is this so hard for me? I feel so guilty. And I had to realize that all of the feelings I was shoving down in my body needed somewhere to go. And when I actually gave them space, they had to come up and out. So sometimes it gets a little worse before it gets better. And I'm sure you experience that when people are teaching sleep, right? It gets a little worse before it gets better. Oh, man. But you have to ask yourself, how do I want to feel? And what actions are going to allow me to get closer to that feeling? Mm-hmm. And that's ultimately what in control is to me.
I love that. And I think we get a little caught up. I talk about self-care all the time in my community, and I think sometimes we think of self-care as like, I got to carve out a whole day to go to the spa, or I need all of this mm-hmm. time for self-care. But I always encourage people to just start, like you said, with what do I need in this moment to feel in control of myself and to feel better or at peace. And like for me, one thing I figured out about a year ago is that when I get home, I have a little apartment that I work out of, and then I leave my apartment to go to my real house at the end of my work day. And mm-hmm. I've discovered, and I had to tell the whole family, I'm like, when I walk in the door, I need 7 minutes. And I go into my bedroom, I close the door, and I lay down on my bed for 7 minutes, and I just do a little bit of meditation, or I just have a moment to myself. And that's my transition time, right? Just a little bit of a regroup mm-hmm. before now I'm back into family life and all the things that need to happen, through the dinner hour. And that's 7 minutes. People can live without me for those 7 minutes. It's just letting everyone know that that's what I need, and then honoring mm-hmm. it, right? And just showing up for it and actually doing it. Once I've made that statement, I've got to follow through on it. And that it doesn't have to, like you said, you could go sit in the car for 5 minutes. It doesn't have to be these grand gestures. It could just be the mm-hmm. little things that you need in the moments of the day that add to your quality.
Yeah, I actually believe self-care shouldn't cost you anything.
Right.
We can treat ourselves. I love I'm not even a manicure, pedicure type of girl, but I can go get a massage. I can do all of those things. Sometimes that actually causes more stress because that's truly not what I'm craving in the moment. I believe true ultimate self-care, and I know self-care is a trendy word. I almost call it like self-respect. And self-love is a trendy word too. It's like self-respect. When you respect yourself enough to give yourself what you truly need, you will watch people around you change their behavior. So by you creating those 7 minutes and having enough self-respect to say, I need these 7 minutes and this is how it's going to work. I'm going to go into my room, I'm going to close the door, and no one's allowed in here until I come out. The first few times, again, they might go, whoa, what's this? She doesn't do this. And they might come in, and then you instill the boundary and say, I got 4 more minutes left. Right. And then eventually they know, and they don't even go near that. And that it's like little things like that where we're creating those little self-respect actions and little declarations all day, every day. And as soon as my office door closes, my kids know I'm busy, and most likely I'm on an interview or something. I'm in something, and I will just look at them and say, if you need me, like, let me know. But it's not going to happen right now. And it's been a magical transformation, but we can't expect other people to respect us if we do not respect ourselves.
That's so true. I agree. So tell us, Heather, how would people find out more about you, or if I know you're a coach, so if they wanted to do some coaching with you or find out more about your podcast, tell us where we should go.
Yeah, so the best place to find me and to just get an idea of what I'm about is the podcast. So it's called Mom is in Control. It can be found anywhere. Or my website, Heather Chauvin, CHAUVIN.com. I hang out on Instagram as well. It's just at my name, Heather Chauvin _ And I have my book coming out early 2021. So that's been an interesting part. And I will be sharing more about that on Instagram as I get more details.
That's super exciting. Can't wait to read it.
It's been a very interesting process, that's for sure.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be here with us. I think that was very insightful, and it was just a really food for thought conversation. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Dana.
Thanks so much for listening. For more great tips on helping your child sleep through the night, remember to subscribe, rate, and review the show on iTunes or Stitcher, and never miss an episode.